Tech by Tips.
Welcome to another Tech by Tips video. In today's video, we're starting the third section of the Introduction to Azure DevOps series, and we're going to start talking about the Azure pipelines. This is a very meaty section. It's a very fun section. It's where we get to do stuff, and that's how we build and release those applications that we work on. So let's get to starting with that. On the lesson, we're going to cover the difference between CI and CD, or continuous integration and continuous delivery, also known as the build or release process. Additionally, after that, we're going to be talking about the agents and the agent pools, which are necessary for you to have those jobs execute in some system. And we're going to talk about the deployment groups, which is another way that you can do deployments. After that, we're going to be covering a little bit quickly the differences between the classic and the YAML pipelines. And after that, we're going to go with a quick demo of the options that we have available in Azure DevOps and how to configure it if you want to use the classic pipelines. Now, for the CI/CD, or the build and release process, what does this mean? Continuous integration and continuous delivery, the goal for those are to automate as much as possible and to eliminate manual processes as much as you can. When it comes to continuous integration, that means that we test and we validate our code and we catch bugs as soon as possible. And we add features also as soon as possible. Continuous integration is usually achieved because it is automatically triggered through either code commits or on a schedule, or it can also be done manually. And continuous delivery means to constantly update our product and to constantly deploy it, if possible, automatically to all of our environments, minimizing the amount of manual steps that are necessary. And it can be triggered based on a new artifact that got built or on a schedule, or it could also be through a pull request or after a stage in a pipeline, or it can also be triggered manually. And if we look at the bottom of the slide, we'll see what a pipeline looks like. And it's divided into those two sections. The first part, from the Git logo to the package, that's the continuous integration or the build process. And then from the package to the server, that's the continuous delivery or the release part of the pipeline. And Azure DevOps breaks this down into basically those two options. If you're using the classic pipelines, then you're going to have the build process in one pipeline and the release process in another definition. So it splits it into two processes. But if you're doing the YAML pipelines, which is the new way, you can put the whole pipeline structure in one pipeline definition. Now, for our pipeline to work, we need to have agents and agent pools. What does this mean? Well, first we have to take a look at the structure of a pipeline. The pipeline is in general is defined by a name, right? And then under that pipeline, you have jobs. And then there can be one or multiple jobs. And those jobs have tasks underneath them. And those tasks need to be run by an agent or in an agent. And what is an agent? An agent is basically a runtime that runs that task. And that runtime can be hosted in a bare metal machine or a virtual machine or a container. And the agents are put into agent pools. So basically an agent pool is created at the organizational level, and you can have two types also. It could be hosted machines by Microsoft or self-hosted machines. So you can use a machine that Microsoft hosts, or you can host your own and connect it. And an agent pool is a group of agents, and it contains a list of all those agents, and it should at least have one agent in the pool. And agents can have the status of online or offline. For example, if a machine is down for some reason, maybe there's maintenance going on or connectivity is lost with that agent, then it'll show up as offline. But if it's available to take on jobs and tasks, it'll show up as online. And then the jobs can be assigned to an agent pool, right? And then any of the agents can be used to run it. But it'll only run on one agent when you're using agent pools. And you can also be specific, like you can have an agent that can only run specific types of jobs. For example, if we look at the image, we have agent 1, which has all the dependencies necessary to run PHP 8 tasks. But you have agent number 2, which has all the dependencies necessary. It's hard to see, but there's a Java logo there. So if you need to run a Java project, you use agent 2. And if you need PHP, it'll be agent 1. And you can specify demands and capabilities. The demands are a key value pair of things that a task needs in order to run in an agent. And the capabilities is a description of the capabilities of that agent. So, for example, in this case, only agent 1 can serve task 1 because task 1 requires PHP 8 and agent 1 has PHP 8. And in the same case for Java, task 2 can only be run on agent 2 because agent 2 has Java. And you can have multiple jobs in a pipeline, and each job can have one or multiple tasks. So that's basically an overview of the structure of how agents and agent pools are structured in Azure DevOps and how you can use them and control them. But we also have the deployment groups. Deployment groups are similar to agent pools in that it works the same way. It is used to execute the tasks, but we use deployment groups when we want to execute something in multiple machines at the same time. So if you need to do something in parallel in a lot of different machines, you would use a deployment group. So the task will be running all of the machines in that group. And it's basically it. It works the same way as an agent. You can specify demands and capabilities also. It works the same way. The pipeline works with jobs that have tasks, and those tasks are run in the agents. Now, we can define pipelines in Azure DevOps in two ways. We can create what is called the classic pipelines, which is how it originated, and we have the YAML pipelines. They have differences that we're going to discuss, but it's good to point out that classic pipelines is the original version of the pipelines in Azure DevOps, and it's not used very often anymore. Now people are using YAML pipelines because YAML pipelines are a replacement for the classic pipelines because it allows you to do GitOps, where your pipeline is also managed through source control. The main difference is the classic pipelines focus a lot on the user interface, so all of the changes to the pipeline are done in the user interface. The advantages is that it's easier to learn, it's best for beginners, and it's simpler and faster to manage and edit the pipeline. And if you already started a pipeline, you can edit it while the pipeline is going through the process. While the YAML pipeline is more focused on the code, and it requires maintaining YAML files. So this caters to more advanced users, people that come, for example, from Jenkins, where you use files to define the pipeline in code. But the problem is that if you want to manage that pipeline, it requires changes to source control and, for example, things like pull requests. And the good thing is that the pipeline can reside right next to the code of our application. It's just another file, a YAML file. But the problem is that we cannot edit the pipeline while it's working. So if you need to make a change on a pipeline that was started, you need to actually restart that pipeline after you make the changes. But a good thing that we have here is that the pipelines can be multi-stage. So in the classics, you break it down into two different sections, the build and the release. But in the YAML, you can actually do all of that in one pipeline definition. So that's the advantage of the pipeline being multi-stage. And that's all for the slides. So we can go ahead now and talk about the options that we have in Azure DevOps and things that we might need to do if we want to use classic pipelines. Okay, let's go into our Azure DevOps instance. And when we click on the pipelines section here on the left side, we'll see that we have, by default, in my case, three options. One of them is pipelines, another one is environments, and another one is library. And this is basically telling me that the classic pipelines are not enabled right now, because if they were, we would see more options here. And we can validate that if I try to create a new pipeline. If you can see here where it says where is your code for the pipeline, everything is YAML. So it is assuming that I'm trying to create a YAML pipeline, and I just have to tell it where that file resides in the repository. And we have several options here. We could use Azure Repos, Bitbucket, GitHub, or GitHub Enterprise. And that's the first thing that I wanted to point out. If you want to start practicing with the classic pipelines, we have to go back at the organizational level. So we go and click into our organization, then we go into the organizational settings, and then here we'll go down to where it says pipeline settings. And then here we'll see something that says disable the creation of classic build pipelines and disable the creation of classic release pipelines. This is why we don't have the option to create those, but we can easily come here and untoggle those options. So now they're going to be re-enabled, and we're going to have that available to us again. For now, that's enough. That's what I wanted to do. So we can go back into our organization, go into the project, and then go into pipelines. And now, as you can see, we have more options. So now we do have the releases, we have deployment groups, we have task groups, in addition to the environments and the library and pipelines that we had before. So now we know for sure that we can use classic pipelines because we have more options here, and we can validate that by clicking on the create pipeline button. And then here you see you have the option of using YAML, but you also have this link that says use the classic editor to create a pipeline without YAML. So now we have that opportunity where we can go here and use the original classical pipeline. So that's something that I wanted to make sure that we know how to address. And now in this video, we're going to just show what we see in these options. In the pipelines is where we can see our pipelines and we can create pipelines. So this would be the CI, the continuous integration part of it, if you're following the normal classical way of doing this. And then in the releases is where you would do the deployment or the delivery, which would be the second stage of a normal pipeline. So you would have that separated into those two, the pipelines and the releases. Now, if you go into environments, in here is where you can define different environments and the resources that are associated with those environments. For example, I could create an environment here that is for the dev environment, and that includes all the machines or maybe clusters that are exclusive for the dev environment. Or I can just start it blank, and then I can just add the resources later. You have this option here to do that. If you select, for example, Kubernetes and you click next, you will have the option to connect to Azure or use another generic provider. For example, if you have a private data center with machines there that are a node in a Kubernetes cluster, you can connect to that. And it gives you all that you need to connect to that. If we go back, we also have the opportunity to use virtual machines. So in that case, we can select a generic provider and then the type of operating system that we're going to use. And then we can, using these options here, connect that VM to Azure DevOps so that it shows up as an agent that is available for us for that environment. So that's how you create the environments. Then the library here is a section where we can store variable groups and we can store secure files. For example, certificates, signing keys, and stuff like that. You can put them in here for later use in the pipelines. You can create variable groups here directly, and it's pretty useful. Additional, we have the task groups on the left side, and in here you can create groups of tasks that are centrally managed and standardized, and then you can basically reuse them as steps for your application build and deployment. And we have the deployment groups, which is what we mentioned before, another way of setting up agents when you need to execute a pipeline against a group of machines. You would have one agent per machine, and you define them here, and then you can use them in your pipeline. Another thing that I wanted to mention is we've talked about the agents, but we haven't seen them here. So we can always define our agents by going into the project settings and then going to agent pools, and here we're going to see the agent pools that we have. If you need a new pool, you can create it here, and if you need to edit the pool and see what we have there, for example, you can go into the pool and then you'll see information like jobs that have been run under details, the agents that are currently available for this pipeline. As you can see, I currently have a hosted agent, which is a Microsoft machine that is online and I can actually use. You can go into the details here to see more information about the pipeline. In security, you can manage permissions to the pipeline, so you can allow people or disallow people to manage or do things with the pipeline. Here you have the approvals and checks. If there is any process that requires any approvals, they can come here and do what they need for the pipeline to continue. And analytics will show you information about the consumption of the pool, but we currently don't have anything. So that's how you get to the agents, and that's how you register an agent, basically using this option here. So that's going to be it for this video. It's already pretty long as it is. So we're going to continue on our next video with some examples of creating classic pipelines using Azure DevOps for building and releasing an application. So thank you for being here, and remember, if you like the content, like it, subscribe to the channel. It'll help us grow and reach more people. Share the videos if you think that somebody might find them useful. And remember, I'm not monetizing this channel, so I rely entirely on your donations and your support to be able to dedicate time to the channel. So if you want to support me to create more content for you to learn, to develop yourself, feel free to use the links in the description below to do a PayPal donation or a Bitcoin donation if you want. And thank you very much. We've already reached 1,100 subscribers in the channel, so that makes me really happy, and I'm glad that people are finding my videos to be useful. I'll see you in the next one. That's gonna be it for this one.